In the previous video, we took a look at changing the track division. So just a reminder here, we got the track buttons going across the top. We can click to select a track. And then down here in the LCD, making sure we have track selected and clicking the setting 1 to the right, and there's the division. Now, before I show you what I was going to show you about the relationship between track division and Microstep, I first want to show you what the Microstep Editor does when you mouse over each individual step. I'm going to start here by clicking Micro, and I'm going to select a step. All right, so we've got this one. Now, one thing to pay attention to here is down at the bottom left, when you're in the Microstep Editor, as you put your mouse over each of the steps, you can see that it tells you what the division of that step is. Now, one thing to note here is that the amount of time, the division that it's showing us here, is related to two things. First, it's related to the length of the microstep, and second, it's related to the division that the track is set at. So here you can see, right now the track that I'm editing is set to a 16th note, and a 16th divided by 8 gives us one 128th note. So you can see as I mouse over it, that's exactly what it's telling us. You can use length to change the length of the microstep. So for example, I'm going to hit length here. I'm going to click the last step that I want, so I'll pick this fourth one. Now I notice that when I did that, now when I mouse over each of these steps, it has in fact changed the division. So let me show you what exactly that's doing. I'm going to fill all of these in, and we'll just make this short here, and I'll hit play. And here you can see it's going kind of fast, but here you can see we're getting these sputters of these notes here. Now, if I go back and I edit this, I'm going to change the length to just 4. So we're going from 8 128th notes down to 4 164th notes, and you can see that down here on the bottom left of the LCD. I'm going to hit play, and you can see that sure enough, we're getting 4, and you see that instead of getting 4 short ones like we were previously, we are now getting 4 longer ones. So this is a key concept, which is the way that microsteps work is they take the track division and they subdivide it by however many steps you have enabled here in the Microstep Editor. So we can do the same thing. I'm going to change the length to 6, and you can see we'll start getting spurts of 6. I can change the length to 2, and you can see we've subdivided it now to 2 portions. And I could even change the length to 1, which would be kind of silly. I mean, effectively at this point, it's almost like we don't have a microstep. But, you know, it's a possible thing you could do, and the sequencer will allow you to do that. So this relationship between microsteps and division is important. Now, this is cool because you can also change your track division, and the microstep will react accordingly. So for example, let's say instead that I changed my track division here to quarter note. When we go back and we look at this in the Microstep Editor, you can see as I'm mousing over it now, because we have a quarter note divided by 4, that means we have 16th notes. And sure enough, if I play this, let me zoom out a little bit on the scope. If I play this, you can see we're getting much slower notes. I could subdivide that by 8, in which case I'm getting 32nd notes. I could subdivide it by 2, in which case I'm getting an 8th note. So you can see that there's this very interesting combination of how many microsteps you have versus what your track division is. Here's an example to get you thinking about how the interplay between track division and microsteps can matter. All right, so I dropped the scope and I added instead a bass drum module. And the way that a lot of electronic music works is you will want the bass to hit whenever there is a quarter note of the bar. So you would have to come in and you would have to click all of these steps like this. You know, to get something that sounds, like that. If you wanted to add a pattern variation, you could throw a couple of steps at the end here. All right, so this is neat. It's okay, like it's fine to do it this way, but let me show you another way that you can do this. So I'm going to clear out what we have here, and I'm instead going to go down to division, and I'm going to change division to a quarter note. And the reason I'm changing it to a quarter note is because we want the bass drum to hit on every quarter note. Now I haven't yet talked about this button here, Invert, but if you press it, what it'll do is it'll convert all the steps to be the opposite of how they are now. So you can see that they're all off. I'm going to hit Invert, and they're all on. So now, without a whole lot of work, we have a basically repeating pattern here. Now this is where microsteps can come in, because remember the microsteps are a division of the steps here. So if we wanted to have a variation at the end of each bar, because each of these squares represent a quarter note, we know that basically every 4 is going to be a bar, so we can put a microstep here on this very last step. So I'm going to hit micro, I'm going to click on the last step. Now each of these notes, you can see as I mouse over, is a 30-second. That's probably a little bit too long, so I'm going to change the length down to, or rather that's a little bit too short. I'm going to change the length down to just 4, and you can see now that we're getting 16th notes. And I'm going to put 2 at the end here. Now effectively what this will do is it'll give us that same variation that you heard on the previous pattern, except instead of having to click in all those notes, I'm just using the first row of buttons to define 1 bar, and I could make a different variation on the next one. Let's take a listen. Cool. So that was pretty neat. I realized that I forgot to put the first one here, and there was that little pause, but I kind of liked it. I'm going to leave that. We could do the same thing again here. I could put another variation in here. Let's clear this out. So I'll do that again. Now we've got this variation. What you're seeing we can do with this is now we can basically treat these 64 steps, instead of it being 64 16th notes, it can be 64 quarter notes. Each row represents 4 bars, and this whole thing here is actually representing 6 bars, in which we can have a variation at the end. And it was very easy for us to make a 16-bar pattern by leveraging division and intelligently setting microstep length and where those hits.